I never thought I'd find myself at war with my own neighborhood, but as I stared at the pile of splintered wood and metal where my boathouse once stood, I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a crime. My name is Nathan Garrison, and this is the story of how my quiet life on Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota, became a legal battleground against the most terrifying force in suburban America. A power-hungry homeowner association with a vendetta. The first hint that something was wrong came on a crisp October morning in 2024. I'd lived in Shoreline Estates for nearly 6 years by then, a lakefront community that had seemed like a dream when I purchased the property. The house wasn't anything spectacular, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with weathered cedar siding, but its real value was the private dock and boathouse that stretched into the clear waters of the lake. I'd spent every spare weekend for the past 2 summers renovating that boathouse, transforming it from a leaking shack into a proper workshop where I restored vintage boats, a hobby that had gradually evolved into a small side business. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Thomas Wilson. "You might want to check your security cameras from last night. Saw people around your boathouse." My stomach dropped. I'd installed a comprehensive security system after a rash of boat thefts in the area. Last year, 4 weatherproof cameras with night vision and motion sensors that sent alerts to my phone. But I'd slept through the night without notifications, which meant either the system had malfunctioned or someone had disabled it. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the security footage. Everything seemed normal until 2:17 a.m., when the feed from all 4 cameras simultaneously went black. The system had recorded nothing for over 4 hours, then resumed at 6:32 a.m., showing my boathouse completely intact. "That's not possible," I muttered to myself, glancing out the kitchen window toward the lake. Even from this distance, I could see something was wrong. The familiar silhouette of my boathouse was missing from the shoreline. I abandoned my coffee and rushed outside, still wearing the sweatpants and t-shirt I'd slept in. The October air bit at my skin as I sprinted down the sloping lawn toward the water's edge. What I found there stopped me cold. My boathouse was gone. Not damaged, not vandalized, completely gone. Only the concrete foundation and a few jagged wooden posts remained. The dock appeared unharmed, but the structure that had stood at its end for decades had been reduced to a pile of debris that now floated in the shallows or lay scattered across the shoreline. More shocking than the destruction was what was missing. All my specialized tools, the antique wood planers, the custom-built steam box for bending wood, the collection of hand tools I'd inherited from my grandfather, were nowhere to be seen. The 1962 Chris Craft I'd been painstakingly restoring for a client was also gone, along with the original brass fittings I'd spent months tracking down. "What the hell happened?" Thomas called out, jogging down from his property next door. "I have no idea," I said, my voice hollow with shock. "Someone cut my camera feed and demolished my boathouse." "Jesus," Thomas whispered, surveying the destruction. "This wasn't a storm or accident, this was deliberate." I nodded numbly, trying to process the scale of what I was seeing. That's when I noticed a piece of paper fluttering from one of the remaining posts. I waded into the shallow water and snatched it free. It was a notice from the Shoreline Estates Homeowner Association, printed on their official letterhead, with yesterday's date. Notice of demolition. This structure has been deemed non-compliant with HOA Bylaw 7.3 regarding shoreline structures. Multiple violation notices have been issued without response. As per Section 12.1 of the Shoreline Estates Covenant, the association has exercised its right to remove the non-compliant structure. All costs associated with removal will be billed to the homeowner. The notice was signed Patricia Morrison, HOA President. My hands shook with rage. "This is impossible. They can't just destroy private property." Thomas took the paper from me, reading it with a deepening frown. "Did you get any violation notices before this?" "Absolutely not," I was certain. Nothing, not a letter, email, phone call, nothing. Well, Patricia's had it out for you since you spoke against her at the summer meeting, Thomas reminded me. Remember when she wanted to ban boat repairs anywhere in the community? I remembered all too well. Patricia Morrison had taken over as HOA president 6 months ago after running unopposed. In her late 50s, with a perpetually pinched expression and a helmet of bottle blonde hair, she'd moved to our community from some exclusive gated development in Connecticut and immediately set about trying to transform Shoreline Estates into her vision of lakeside perfection. When she proposed banning all boat maintenance and repairs, a rule clearly aimed at my small operation, I'd rallied enough homeowners to defeat the measure. Patricia hadn't spoken to me since. I need to call the police, I said, already pulling out my phone. This isn't just HOA overreach, this is destruction of property and theft. And I'll pull my security footage, Thomas offered. My cameras might have caught something yours missed. The sheriff's deputy who responded was a young officer named Deputy Reynolds. He took pictures of the destruction, collected the HOA notice, and wrote down my initial statement, but I could tell he was skeptical. Mr. Garrison, I understand you're upset, he said, closing his notepad. But this appears to be a civil matter between you and your HOA. A civil matter. I was incredulous. They destroyed a structure worth tens of thousands of dollars and stole equipment and a boat worth even more. How is that not criminal? Deputy Reynolds sighed. The HOA does have certain enforcement rights in their covenant. If they followed proper procedures for notification and you were in violation, I wasn't in violation of anything, I insisted, and I never received any notices. They're lying. Then you'll need to take that up with them or pursue it in civil court, he replied. Without clear evidence of theft rather than removal of violating materials, there's not much we can do criminally. I could feel my blood pressure rising. So if I decided my neighbor's gazebo violated some rule I made up, I could tear it down and take everything inside, and that would be fine. Sir, that's not what I'm saying. His tone hardened slightly. I'll file the report, but I'm advising you this is likely going to be a civil issue. After the deputy left, I stood staring at the ruins of my boathouse, trying to figure out my next move. That's when Thomas jogged back down to the shore, his face flushed with excitement. Nathan, you need to see this, he said, holding up his tablet. My security camera caught everything. We huddled over the screen as Thomas played the footage. His camera had a partial view of my boathouse from across the water, and while the angle wasn't perfect, what it showed was damning. At 2:05 a.m., 3 vehicles pulled up on the service road that ran behind our properties. A white van with the logo of a local construction company, an SUV I recognized as belonging to Patricia Morrison, and a pickup truck I'd seen the HOA maintenance supervisor driving. The footage showed 5 people approaching my boathouse. One immediately climbed a ladder and appeared to disable my security cameras. Then, instead of starting demolition, they spent nearly an hour removing items from the boathouse, loading my tools, equipment, and even dismantled parts of the Chris craft into the white van. Only after they'd emptied the boathouse did they begin tearing it down, working methodically with sledgehammers and power tools. Patricia Morrison herself didn't participate in the heavy work, but directed the operation, pointing and giving orders. By 5:30 a.m., the boathouse was reduced to rubble, and by 6:15 they had driven away, leaving only the demolition notice behind. This changes everything, I said, a cold fury settling in my chest. This wasn't HOA enforcement. This was a targeted burglary disguised as an HOA action. You need to show this to the police right away, Thomas urged, and maybe get a lawyer. I called the sheriff's office immediately and asked for Deputy Reynolds to return. While waiting, I began documenting everything, taking detailed photos of the destruction, making a comprehensive list of everything stolen, and gathering my records to prove I'd never received any violation notices. I also called Rachel Keller, an attorney I'd met through a mutual friend at a boat show last summer. She specialized in property law and had mentioned dealing with overreaching HOAs in the past. When I explained the situation, she agreed to meet me at my house that afternoon. Deputy Reynolds returned with a more senior officer, Sergeant Daniels. Their attitude shifted dramatically after viewing Thomas's security footage. "This is no longer just a civil matter," Sergeant Daniels confirmed, his expression grim. "The footage clearly shows theft occurring before any demolition. We'll need copies of this video and a detailed inventory of everything taken. The boat alone is worth over $60,000, I told them. The tools and equipment may be another $30,000. Some of those tools were irreplaceable family heirlooms. We'll put out an alert for the vehicles and individuals," Sergeant Daniels assured me. "In the meantime, do not confront anyone from your HOA about this. Let us handle the investigation." By the time Rachel arrived, I had a preliminary report number from the sheriff's office and was working on my inventory list. Rachel was younger than I expected, probably mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing as she surveyed the remains of my boathouse. "This is one of the most egregious HOA overreaches I've ever seen," she said, after reviewing the evidence and watching the security footage. "They've opened themselves up to serious liability here, both the HOA as an entity and the individuals involved." "What should we do first?" I asked. "We need to secure an emergency injunction to prevent them from billing you for this demolition, which I guarantee they're planning to do," Rachel explained. "Then we file both civil and criminal complaints. The civil suit will be against the HOA, Patricia Morrison personally, and anyone else involved. The criminal side will proceed through the sheriff's office. Will they actually face consequences?" I couldn't help asking. "I've heard horror stories about HOAs getting away with almost anything." Rachel's expression hardened. "HOAs do have significant legal protection, but what they did crosses multiple lines. They committed burglary and grand theft, destroyed private property without proper notification, and likely violated numerous state laws regarding riparian rights and shoreline construction. Plus," she added with a grim smile, "we have it all on video." The next morning, I woke to find an invoice slipped under my front door, $18,750, for emergency demolition and removal of non-compliant structure. The letterhead matched the demolition notice, with Patricia Morrison's signature at the bottom. I immediately texted a photo to Rachel, who responded within minutes. "Perfect. This proves they're claiming official HOA action. Don't respond to it. I'm filing our emergency injunction today." What I didn't expect was the knock on my door an hour later. Standing on my porch was Patricia Morrison herself, wearing a beige pantsuit and a concerned expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Nathan," she said with artificial warmth, "I wanted to check if you received the invoice for yesterday's necessary enforcement action. I'm sure this must be upsetting, but rules are rules." I gripped the door frame to keep from saying something I'd regret. "Patricia, I've been advised by my attorney not to discuss this matter with you directly." Her eyebrows shot up. "Attorney? There's no need for attorneys, Nathan. This is a simple HOA matter. You received multiple notices about your non-compliant boathouse." "I never received a single notice," I interrupted, "and we both know it." Her smile tightened. "Our records clearly show 3 violation notices were sent. If you chose to ignore them, that's hardly the association's fault. The board unanimously approved the enforcement action. Did the board also approve stealing my tools and a client's boat before demolishing the structure? Because that's on video." For just a moment, Patricia's mask slipped, her eyes widening in genuine alarm before she composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about. We removed debris as part of the demolition process. Nothing was stolen." "Tell that to the sheriff's department," I said, starting to close the door. "They have the footage." Patricia's hand shot out, preventing me from closing the door completely. Now, Nathan, let's not make this adversarial. I'm sure we can work something out that doesn't involve outside parties. Take your hand off my door, Patricia. This conversation is over. She withdrew her hand but not her presence. You're making a serious mistake. The HOA has resources you can't imagine. This will not end well for you. With that threat hanging in the air, she turned and walked stiffly back to her SUV parked in my driveway. I watched her leave, then immediately called Sergeant Daniels to report the encounter. The next week unfolded in a blur of legal maneuvers. Rachel obtained the emergency injunction preventing the HOA from billing me or taking any further action against my property. She also filed a comprehensive civil lawsuit seeking damages for the destruction of my boathouse, the theft of my tools and the boat, and punitive damages for the HOA's willful and malicious conduct. Meanwhile, the Sheriff's Department investigation uncovered some startling information. The construction company whose van appeared in the security footage denied any knowledge of the demolition. When shown images of their vehicle at the scene, the owner, Michael Jenkins, turned pale. "That's our van, but we didn't authorize any work at Shoreline Estates that night," he insisted. "It should have been locked in our yard." Further investigation revealed that the van had been signed out using the foreman's code by someone named Gregory Phillips, the HOA's maintenance supervisor, the same man seen in the security footage. Phillips had worked for Jenkins Construction before taking the HOA position 6 months earlier, coinciding with Patricia's rise to power. The Sheriff's Department executed search warrants on both Patricia Morrison's home and Gregory Phillips' residence. They didn't recover my tools or the boat parts, but they did find paperwork related to the unauthorized demolition, including emails between Patricia, Gregory, and 2 board members discussing their plan to solve the Nathan Garrison problem once and for all. Most damning of all was a handwritten inventory in Patricia's elegant script, listing my stolen tools alongside estimated values and potential buyers. The theft wasn't just opportunistic, it was premeditated. 3 weeks after the demolition, Patricia Morrison, Gregory Phillips, and 2 HOA board members, Elizabeth Danvers and Harold Thompson, were arrested on charges of burglary, grand theft, criminal destruction of property, and conspiracy. The community erupted in shock. An emergency HOA meeting was called, where the remaining board members distanced themselves from Patricia's actions and voted to cooperate fully with both the criminal investigation and my civil suit. "We had no knowledge of President Morrison's plans," insisted Vice President James Fletcher, a retired accountant who'd always seemed reasonable during meetings. "The board never approved any action against Mr. Garrison's boathouse, the documents claiming we did are forgeries." As the criminal case progressed, I received a call from Sergeant Daniels with unexpected news. "We found your boat, Mr. Garrison, or parts of it at least." "Where?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "A boat restoration shop in Wisconsin." The owner purchased several rare Chris Craft components from Gregory Phillips about 2 weeks ago. He got suspicious when he recognized some custom work that didn't match the story Phillips told him about their provenance. Some of my specialized tools were recovered from various pawn shops and second-hand dealers across 3 states, but many items remained missing. The financial loss was substantial, but what hurt more was losing the tools my grandfather had used and passed down to me, the physical connection to the man who'd taught me to love woodworking and boats. The preliminary hearing for the criminal case was scheduled for early December. I sat in the county courthouse beside Rachel, watching as Patricia Morrison and her co-defendants entered with their attorneys. Patricia had exchanged her designer clothes for a conservative navy suit, her hair less severely styled, her makeup minimal, clearly an attempt to appear more sympathetic. The prosecution presented the security footage, the documented items stolen and their values, and the evidence found during the search warrants. The defense attorneys tried to argue that the HOA had legitimate authority to remove non-compliant structures, but faltered when faced with evidence that no proper notices had been issued, and that my boathouse had, in fact, complied with all legitimate HOA regulations. Your Honor, Patricia's attorney argued, this is, at worst, an overzealous interpretation of HOA enforcement powers. Miss Morrison believed she was acting within her authority. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Abigail Torres, countered immediately, "Does Miss Morrison's authority include disabling security systems at 2 a.m., stealing over $90,000 worth of private property before demolition, creating false documentation, and then attempting to bill the victim for the privilege of being robbed?" The evidence clearly shows this was a targeted criminal action disguised as HOA enforcement. The judge agreed there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, setting a court date for February and denying the defense's request to dismiss the most serious charges. Outside the courthouse, reporters from local news stations had gathered, drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Rachel had warned me they might be present and advised me to make only brief, factual statements. "Mr. Garrison, how do you respond to the HOA's claim that your boathouse violated community guidelines?" asked a reporter, thrusting a microphone toward me. "My boathouse was fully compliant with both HOA regulations and county building codes," I stated. "I have documentation proving this, which has been submitted to the court. Are you concerned this case might damage the community of Shoreline Estates?" asked another. I considered my answer carefully. I believe in communities governing themselves reasonably. What happened here wasn't reasonable governance, it was a criminal act by individuals abusing their positions. I have faith that our justice system will recognize the difference. As Rachel and I walked to her car, a familiar figure approached James Fletcher, the HOA vice president. "Mr. Garrison," he began hesitantly, "I wanted to speak with you directly. The remaining board members have reviewed your case extensively, and we believe a terrible injustice was done to you." "That's putting it mildly," I replied, not bothering to hide my bitterness. Fletcher nodded. "We're prepared to offer a settlement from the HOA's insurance policy, full replacement value for your boathouse and all stolen property, plus additional compensation for your trouble. We'll also guarantee no interference with rebuilding to the exact same specifications." I glanced at Rachel, who gave a slight shake of her head. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Fletcher," I said, "but I'll need to discuss any settlement with my attorney. This isn't just about money." "Of course," he replied, handing Rachel his card. "Please contact me when you're ready to discuss terms." As he walked away, Rachel murmured, "Smart of them to offer settlement now. Their liability insurance rates are going to skyrocket once this case becomes public record." "Should I consider it?" I asked. "We'll review any formal offer they make," she said, "but I think we have leverage for a much better settlement than whatever they're initially proposing, and that's just the civil side. The criminal charges will proceed regardless." January brought heavy snow to Lake Minnetonka, covering the remains of my boathouse in a pristine white blanket that somehow made its absence more pronounced. I'd been staying with my sister in Minneapolis during the worst of the media attention, but had recently moved back home, determined not to be driven away from the property I loved. One evening, as I sat by my fireplace reviewing construction estimates for rebuilding the boathouse in spring, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Thomas and his wife Lisa, along with half a dozen other neighbors, standing on my porch with casserole dishes and bottles of wine. "Neighborhood Support Committee," Thomas announced with a grin. "We figured you could use some company and home-cooked food." I invited them in, genuinely touched by the gesture. As we shared dinner around my rarely used dining table, the conversation inevitably turned to the HOA situation. "We've called for a complete overhaul of the board and bylaws," explained Margaret Chen, who lived 3 doors down. "What happened to you made everyone realize how vulnerable we all are when power gets concentrated with the wrong people. Patricia always had a reputation for being difficult," added Robert Johnson, an elderly man who'd lived in Shoreline Estates since it was built. But none of us imagined she'd go this far. The scary part, Lisa said, refilling wine glasses, is how many people just went along with her. The board rubber-stamped whatever she wanted. Not anymore, Thomas assured me. We're organizing a committee to review and rewrite the HOA covenant to prevent anything like this from happening again. We'd value your input, Nathan. I was surprised to find myself agreeing. Despite everything, I still believed in the potential for communities to self-govern effectively just with proper checks and balances. The trial began in early February, drawing more media attention than I'd anticipated. Patricia Morrison, Gregory Phillips, Elizabeth Danvers, and Harold Thompson sat at the defense table, a visual study in contrasts. Patricia maintained her composure, occasionally whispering to her attorney. Gregory looked perpetually nervous, his eyes darting around the courtroom. Elizabeth seemed genuinely distressed, while Harold's expression remained stonily impassive. The prosecution built a methodical case, presenting the security footage, the documentation found during the searches, and testimony from various experts about the value of the stolen property and the illegality of the demolition. I took the stand on the third day, describing the history of my boathouse, the work I'd put into it, and the shock of discovering it destroyed. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a troublemaker who had repeatedly violated HOA rules, but faltered when asked to produce records of these supposed violations. Isn't it true, Mr. Garrison, that you opposed several of Mrs. Morrison's initiatives for community improvement? The defense attorney asked. I opposed initiatives that I believed were unreasonable or beyond the scope of HOA authority, I clarified, like the proposal to ban all boat maintenance and repairs, which would have effectively outlawed a hobby many lakefront residents enjoy. And this opposition created tension between you and Mrs. Morrison. I suppose it did, but disagreement about HOA policies shouldn't result in criminal actions against homeowners. The most dramatic moment came when Gregory Phillips took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the others in exchange for reduced charges. He described in detail how Patricia had orchestrated the plan. She said Nathan Garrison was making our community look like a boat repair yard, driving down property values, Phillips testified. She wanted to teach him a lesson and get rid of his operation permanently. Whose idea was it to steal Mr. Garrison's tools and the boat? The prosecutor asked. Patricia's. She said if we were going to tear it down anyway, we might as well profit from it. She had buyers lined up before we even did the job. Patricia's attorney objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. When Patricia took the stand in her own defense, her carefully constructed image of a concerned community leader crumbled under cross-examination. Mrs. Morrison, you testified that you sent Mr. Garrison 3 violation notices before taking action. Can you provide copies of those notices? They should be in the HOA records, she replied stiffly. Yet the current HOA secretary has testified that no such notices exist in either paper or electronic records. Can you explain that discrepancy? Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps there was a filing error. A filing error that affected all 3 notices. And the supposed board vote authorizing the demolition, which other board members testify never occurred. As the prosecutor continued dismantling her story, Patricia's composure began to crack. You don't understand, she finally snapped. These communities need standards. Garrison was operating a commercial business out of a residential property, storing dangerous chemicals, making noise. Were any of these alleged violations documented with the HOA or reported to environmental authorities? The prosecutor interrupted. No, but in fact, Mr. Garrison had permits for all his activities and was in full compliance with both HOA regulations and county ordinances, wasn't he? Patricia's face flushed with anger. He was destroying our community's image. Someone had to take action. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning their verdict. Patricia Morrison and Harold Thompson were found guilty on all counts. Elizabeth Danvers was convicted of conspiracy, but acquitted of the burglary and theft charges, as evidence suggested she hadn't known about those aspects of the plan. Gregory Phillips had already pleaded guilty to reduce charges in exchange for his testimony. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, I had the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. I stood before the court, feeling the weight of the community's attention. "What was taken from me can't be measured just in dollars," I began. "My grandfather taught me to work with wood and love boats when I was 10 years old. The tools he passed down to me carried his legacy. The boathouse I built with my own hands represented countless hours of care and craftsmanship. These things had value beyond money. But what disturbs me most is that this crime was committed by people entrusted to serve our community. Homeowner associations exist to maintain standards that benefit everyone, not to pursue personal vendettas or exercise power for its own sake. When that trust is broken, it damages not just individual homeowners but the very concept of community governance. I don't seek vengeance. I seek restoration not just of my property, but of the trust that should exist between neighbors. I hope this case reminds all HOAs that their power comes with responsibility and limitations. The judge sentenced Patricia Morrison to 4 years in prison for the most serious charges, plus restitution. Harold Thompson received 18 months. Elizabeth Danvers was sentenced to probation and community service. Gregory Phillips, due to his cooperation, received 1 year in county jail. As the criminal case concluded, the civil settlement with the HOA was finalized. The association's insurance would pay for complete restoration of my boathouse to its original specifications, replacement of all stolen equipment and tools, and significant additional damages. The settlement also included specific provisions preventing any future HOA board from interfering with my rebuilt boathouse or my boat restoration activities, so long as they remained within county regulations. By April, as the ice melted from Lake Minnetonka, construction began on my new boathouse. I'd modified the design slightly, incorporating better security features and improved workshop facilities, but kept the rustic character that had made the original so special. The HOA, now led by an interim board including Thomas and Margaret, had undergone a complete overhaul of its bylaws. The new regulations emphasized transparency, due process, and reasonable limitations on enforcement powers. Every proposed rule change now required not just board approval but a community vote, and clear appeals processes were established for homeowners who felt rules were being applied unfairly. One sunny Saturday in May, as workers framed the roof of my new boathouse, a truck pulled into my driveway. The driver, a gray-haired man in his 70s, approached me with a weathered wooden case. "Are you Nathan Garrison?" he asked. When I confirmed, he handed me the case. "I bought these at an estate sale in Wisconsin last month. The seller said they came from some HOA controversy. When I opened the case and saw the name carved inside, I looked you up." I unlatched the case with trembling hands. Inside lay my grandfather's set of specialized wood chisels, each one nestled in its custom slot, the handles worn smooth from decades of use. The inside lid bore his carved initials, and mine beside them a gift he'd presented to me on my 18th birthday. "I can't accept payment," the man said, waving away my offered wallet. "These belong with you. I'm just sorry I couldn't recover more of your things." As he drove away, I stood holding the wooden case, a tangible connection to my past restored. I couldn't replace everything that had been taken, but this felt like a sign that healing was possible. By midsummer, my new boathouse stood complete at the end of the dock, its fresh cedar siding gleaming in the sun. The interior was finished with the same care as the original, but with improvements born from hard-learned lessons. A state-of-the-art security system now monitored every approach, with backup power and cellular connections ensuring it couldn't be easily disabled. Inside, I'd begun setting up my workshop again, gradually replacing tools and equipment. The 1962 Chris Craft was gone for good, but I'd reached a settlement with its owner and had already taken on new restoration projects. Life was slowly returning to normal. The final chapter of this ordeal came on a perfect August evening, when the newly elected HOA board held its first community gathering, a lakeside barbecue, celebrating both the revised HOA covenant and the completion of my boathouse. Nearly everyone from Shoreline Estates attended, touring the rebuilt structure and offering congratulations or, in some cases, apologies for not speaking up sooner. James Fletcher, who had been elected president of the new board, raised a toast as sunset painted the lake in gold and crimson. "To neighbors who stand together," he said, "and to remembering that rules exist to serve the community, not the other way around." As conversations flowed around me, Rachel Keller approached, looking relaxed in casual summer clothes rather than her courtroom attire. "Your case has already become something of a landmark," she told me. "I've had calls from attorneys in 3 states asking for details. It's establishing important precedent for limiting HOA powers." "That's good to hear," I replied, "though I'd have preferred to set precedent some other way." She laughed. "Most legal precedents come at someone's expense, unfortunately, but you've handled it with remarkable grace." "I had excellent legal representation," I pointed out, raising my glass to her, "and the boathouse looks wonderful," she added, glancing toward the water. "Better than before from what I can see." "It is," I agreed. "Want the grand tour?" As we walked down to the dock together, I reflected on how this ordeal had changed me. I'd lost something precious, fought through a system that often seemed designed to protect institutions rather than individuals, and emerged with not just restoration but improvement both to my property and to the community itself. My grandfather had taught me that sometimes things must be broken down completely before they can be rebuilt stronger. Standing in my new boathouse, surrounded by neighbors who had finally found their collective voice, I understood the truth of that lesson more deeply than ever before. "So what's next for you?" Rachel asked, running her hand appreciatively over a newly installed workbench. I smiled, picking up my grandfather's chisel set from its place of honor on the wall shelf. "I think I'll build a boat," I said, "from scratch this time." After all, that's what you do when life tears down your carefully constructed plans. You gather the tools you have left, salvage what you can, and build something new. Something that might be even better than what came before.